Today we're putting up wainscoting in the dining room area of our house. I made a few mistakes during this, bad for me, but good for you. So hopefully there's some things in here that can help you out if you're doing this yourself. Stick with us. Hi, welcome to Handyverse, where we turn to DIY as a first resort when our knowledge and skills allow it. And today we are in the dining room again, and we are putting up wainscoting. So I'm going to show you how I do that. First thing to do is get the area cleaned out so I have room to work. This is the wainscoting we're going to be putting up. It is the style is called Mini Pickwick, which will match what's in our kitchen area already. It's rustic grade. They didn't have a premium grade in the store, unfortunately, so there are some knots and other imperfections that I will need to try to work around. Cut most of them out if I can. I do have some extra pieces because I can only get 2 lengths out of each of these boards anyway, so I have some play there. When I cut them to length, I will try to cut out as many imperfections as I can. And as I'm getting started, I need to put an outlet extension on this, and there's another one over here. The central vac port we're going to just cover up because we don't use it. I've already removed the central vac system. So I'm just going to take that cover off and then put the wainscoting right over it. And then while getting ready to do this, I notice what is going to be my first problem. It's that this here trim, this decorative trim on the edge here, is it looks like maybe 3/16 of an inch thick, so it won't be thick enough for the wainscoting to meet up to. So what I'm going to do is just cut another piece, rip a piece on the table saw, and just replace this with a thicker piece of trim. But first things first, let's get the outlets extended. One thing to note, I did check these and they are on 2 different breakers, so if you're doing this, don't assume everything's on one breaker. Check them before you start opening stuff up. And I'll just leave it out that far, and I'll tighten it up after I get the wainscoting put in around it. So that way I have a nice guide to go by too when I have to cut out the hole for it. So before I start putting these on, I wanted to check the length here, just to make sure I'm not left with a little tiny sliver at the end. And if you look here, it's 76 inches right to the end. They're 3.5 inch wide sticks, so that would be, to 70 inches would be an even one, 73.5. And then the next one would be at 77. So I do have a couple of inches of width on that last piece, so I should be good to go start out on this corner with a full width piece. And you can see here that trim is not wide enough, so I'm going to take this off. It doesn't need to be much thicker, but maybe if I double it, it'll be good. And I'll just cut it to the exact same shape of what's on there and then put it back up. I've got a thicker piece of trim on there now. And now I can just go and cut a bunch of these lengths at 33 inches and start making my way across this way until I get to the outlet here where I'll have to cut around the notch. I should be able to just get through this cleanly now at this point. To do this little section in here, I'm going to put 2 pieces in as a pair. I need to rip this one down though because it's too wide, so I'm going to mate them together, get the total width here, and cut this piece, and that'll give me an opportunity to clear one of these knots out too. So yeah, I'm going to rip that, put this up, and then carry on with the other wall along here. So I did cut a whole bunch of these strips to finish off the wall over here. They're pretty bad. There's a lot of knot holes in them. I knew it was rustic grade, but I thought it'd be a little bit better than this. I did cut out what I could, but I'm gonna have a lot of work to do filling holes because we do want to paint these. Regardless, on this wall, that area over there is going to be the most visible, over by the door. So I'm going to pick out the best boards and put those on that side, and then keep over and try and cut out and cover up as much as I can for the rest of it. When you come to something like this that you need to cut around, one way to do it, or to figure out what you need to do, is to put your piece, the next piece on, but don't glue this in place yet, and then use a scrap piece, or just any other piece that's the same width, put it up against your angle that you need to cut, and just draw the line there. And then, oh, that wasn't set, right? So let's do it again. And then go across as well. And that's the piece we need to notch out of this. And that'll also give us the length that we need to cut all of these here to fit underneath this windowsill. So we're gonna cut those now. With the wainscoting on the walls, the next step is to put the rail on the top. I'm going to just use glue and nails for it. You could probably get away with using just nails, but this here is a pocket door, so I want to make sure that I don't drive any nails through the space where that door has to move. So that's the reason I'm using glue, and I will tack it in at the end here, and then probably around here with some nails, as long as I'm clear of that door zone. To get your measurements for the rail, the first thing I did was chop a notch at it here so it clears the trim on the facing wall. And then I could use that, set that on, make sure it's butted up against the wall in the corner, and then I just marked the length to cut it. I'd much rather marking these instead of trying to measure and then cut. So I'm going to stick this on here now, and then we'll get the piece cut for the corner here. To cut the corners, an easy way to do it is to cut this on a 45-degree angle here, and that will give you your line. That'll be the shape of this trim, and I'll show you what that looks like. But to cut it, you want to have a piece of wood under there that you can put this on so it sits flat like it's against the wall. And then you just want to cut this off at a 45 to start in the corner. And if you see there, I've got a bevel, but this here is the shape that I need to cut out so it'll fit flush in the corner. And I'm going to do that on the scroll saw. Like I said, I'm doing this on a scroll saw, but you can use a hand saw, coping saw if you want. Just if you are using a scroll saw, which I'm using because I have it, just the same as when you're cutting the 45, make sure you have a piece under here so it sits flat and that your blade is cutting through here on the vertical. And now I'm just going to cut along this line to get the shape I need. So with that trim cut there, I was able to mark this edge and cut that to meet the windowsill. And now I've got that one glued and nailed on. I'm just gonna run a bead of glue along here and do the same with this and then finish the rest of the trim that way. So with that trim on, if you're staining, you're pretty much good to go. Fill a few nail holes and then go ahead and apply your stain. For me, where I'm painting, I need to do my best to fill in all these knot holes so they don't show through the paint. And I'm going to do that with some drywall and some wood filler and also some primer on top of that. So that's the next thing for me. One thing to note, if you're staining, I did use finger jointed pine. I did that because I knew I was going to paint. If you're staining, you might want to go for a higher grade chair rail. You can get solid pieces. They're quite a bit more expensive, probably another 50% on top of whatever you pay for finger jointed. And also, if you're staining, you should sand too, because if you look at some of this, I don't know if it'll show up on video or not, you can see some chatter marks from the saw when these were cut. So you should take a look for those types of things and sand them out before you stain. For me, time to fill some holes. Lots of sanding done, lots and lots of sanding. They look pretty good. Everything filled in pretty well. There's some spots, like if you can see here, that one's gonna need some more fill, but I am gonna put the primer on next and then I'll fill it afterwards. The reason being, I'll be able to see better what else needs to be touched up once I have a coat of primer on it. First coat of primer on, you can see it covered pretty well, but there's a few things that need to be touched up. It also shows where I didn't notice there was issues, which is the reason why I didn't want to touch things up until I had that coat on. So all these things here I'm gonna run through and touch up and then do another coat of primer, because although I had good coverage, you can see there's still knots here, and I'd rather have a second coat of primer as opposed to multiple coats of paint, because it'll keep the knots from seeping through better. So that's where we are now. And one more coat of primer on there, and you can see it says covered pretty well now. You can still, if you look closely, see where some of the knots are. But I'm happy enough with it at this point to go ahead and put just the wall paint on. For the primer, this is the primer that I used on it. It's expensive, but it does do a good job. And now we're just going with wall paint to finish it off. And I did put the caulking on the trim on the top too, so it does finish it quite a bit. It makes it look a lot better. So now it's ready for the final coat of paint. Hopefully just one coat. First coat of paint is on. I'm going to show you a mistake I made. I was using the roller, and I had a thick pile roller to get into the grooves on the wainscoting, which covered well, and it did good. And one thing I noticed is that in some of the grooves that the paint wasn't going, if I pushed a little harder, it would fill in those grooves of paint. The problem is, it all ran down to the bottom on those grooves. So all that work I did, taking my time to cut in nice and cleanly on the baseboard, went for naught. I'm gonna try and clean this up as best I can, and I didn't intend to put caulking along the baseboard, but I think I'm going to be forced into it. So lesson learned for me, and passing it on to you if you're doing something similar. It sounded great getting the paint into those grooves, but this is what happened to me. So this is going to be my first recovery attempt. I put painter's tape all along the edge, leaving a little gap, and I'm going to spread the paint that has run down on top of this baseboard, so painting the top of the baseboard. But if I get a clean enough line here, I might not need to put caulking on. So worth trying, and I'm going to do that now and see how it goes. Another lesson learned on this, the gaps, it looks pretty good from this direction, but if I come around this side, you can see these lines where the panels are separated, and that's from the grooves. And in retrospect, I should have started, like I started this strip on this edge with the grooves facing this way. I should have started over in the corner over here and moved that way, similar to what you would do with siding on the outside of a house. That would have kept these gaps in check. But now what I'm going to do is put a bit of bead of caulking on each of these, try and clean them up that way and see if that works. And yet another goof up here. You can see the chatter marks on this board. I sanded everything else, but I obviously missed this one, and it's in one of the worst spots possible. So I'm going to try and clean that up. I'll probably do coating of drywall on this one, clean it that way, as opposed to trying to sand it right down again now that it's already got primer and paint on it. So I'll put some drywall on, sand it, and then repaint. Halfway through the caulking, and it does look a lot better. You can see that wall that we've already done versus this wall here with the lines. So it's, you know, extra work, but worth it. And the gaps are small enough that I'm hopeful that the caulking won't shrink and crack over time. We have to redo it again soon, but time will tell us that one. So far so good. Keep going with caulking, and then the last coat of paint, hopefully. All right, here goes. Take this tape off and see if I was able to recover this okay. Not too bad, actually. I didn't intend to have any on the baseboard, but that's better than it all running down the way it was. So I wish I taped it from the beginning, because it's a lot faster to paint cut in, but I'll take it. And that was it, really. That was kind of the last step. So we were really happy with it, how it turned out. It was a lot of work, but in the end, worth it. It transformed the room. We really like it. We're happy with it. Hopefully you found this helpful, and if so, please hit like, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.